my Lord. I feel good now. Yeah, man. Wherever you are, welcome back. It's _Gintu back again to the root of today. And it's one-on-one live coming out from the real G Castle here. And everything is adding it up to make sure that we are looking so carifragistically good and starting this kind of the video. Thank you very much, everyone, for being tuned and locked in. As I'm just looking at people in an aerial manner. So right now you can just check how the company now gonna be looking like and to the down sea level here as everything is getting to the brim point here, because we are at the finishing point of the G Castle here and everything is adding up, and I respect much of the people are being tuned and supporting Gintu to have this kind of the far end that we have just reached and commencing to this kind of the chapter of the G Castle here. So as everything is very interesting and getting to a very fantastic mode that everyone is just enjoying and talking about, oh, let's get forward. That's the best moment that we are. Here I am, I'm just sitting at the small space here provided at the G Castle here, so as I can just look very helter-skelter ki Babylon ki hill slash style ki Hillman Taze and making sure that everything's so fantastic. So guys, I'm going to be talking about, we're going to be having a section of a tree here which is going to be subjected to this kind of the place here, so they can just have a very decisive a small house that we're going to be, whenever you can just come to the G Castle here, you can just climb to the other panel there and you can just enjoy you and relax a little bit. They have just put some of the tree there, so it's going to be having a very good structure of this kind of the tree, and we're going to be lighting whenever we're going to have a good moment here tonight. We're going to be lighting this kind of the tree, so it's one of the fantastic trees that are warm-tizing this kind of an area. This kind of the tree, it's very cold, and that's the very fact that much of the people, whenever they're coming here, they're talking about, oh, into your area here, it's very climatizing and very cold, and it's having that kind of talk about the naturality. Whenever you are here, in terms of getting the fresh air, it's very, very guaranteed 100%. Even if I'm just onto this kind of the tree here, because it's one of the oldest trees here. You can talk about indigenous trees that were here. They were just making sure that they're there from our ancestors here. So it's one of the best tree that it's providing much of the aeration is very warm here, and the condition is very, very, very cold right now. It's a chilly evening that I'm coming out from the G Castle as we are finishing up tiling this kind of the subsection of the G Castle here, making to the far end there, because it's right now here they've just getting out of placing this kind of the grout, and the guy is just continuing to make it more favorable to the far end there. So as everything is in concern, I can just talk about where we have just come from. It's a very far distance, and one of the people want to talk about, oh, Gintu, you might just fall down here, just a little bit far away, but everything is so fantastic as we democratize and make other things to appear very, very fantastic. So as you can just see from this kind of the spot here, we are having the good climate here. So this the home, how it's just looking like, and this is an aerial view of making sure that everybody can just check on how the area is arranged. So I want to be making sure that this kind of the fish ponds now, they are getting to the good point that I was talking about. Now you can just check much of the water now, it's turning into green. What do I mean about the green bloom, or you can talk about the green potential grooming that is coming out. It's already yesterday I had talked about, I have started democratizing with much of the cow dung, because here the good thing is we are having much of the cows. Talk about the herding cows, and also we have the zero grazing cows here, and the good thing is we're going to be using, and the fish like such kind of the climate. Talk about the fish like such kind of a way of rearing much of the fish using the cow dung, because I talked about to have 5 positive impacts of rearing fish with such kind of the small ponds here that are going to be sustainable and sustaining the sustainabilities of sustaining our own sustainabilities of the time. What do I mean in terms of that one? The 5 advantage, or the 5 impact, or the positive impacts of having talk about the cow dung onto the fish pond. It means that the green broom that you're going to be checking, look at this kind of water, it's now green turbidity. That green turbidity, it's one of the naturality we are talking about. Talk about that kind of the essential nutrients relevant for the water or water content, so as it can just overcool and have the phytoplanktons and zooplanktons coming out regularly and with a fantastic moment, which is the healthy bloom. Which healthy bloom do I talk about here? This kind of the healthy bloom I'm talking about is the algae. The algae. Much of the people concerning to the teacher who taught you much of the English will concern about what do I mean about the green bloom, which is the algae, concerning to the pronunciation of your teacher. Here we call it the algae. Some of them call it algae. Some we call it algae. So it's depending to the teacher, whoever came out to make sure that you are getting much of the English possessed to your own position. Very fantastic. So that's why you can just check much of this kind of the fish ponds here. They're reflecting to have a very good a spot hole that will just evacuate and bring us the good vibe that we need about the not commercial fish here, but home consumption. Because I talked about the G Castle here. Much of the people who are new onto the channel, I was talking about this kind of the G Castle here are going to be accommodating its own accommodabilities in terms of the green farms. We're going to be having even the green zones here. Talk about how do I call it? The greenhouses here. And we're going to be having the fish rearing here. We're going to be having the catfish rearing here. And we're going to be having essential things. Talk about the apiculture, horticulture, talk about aquaculture, such kind of the cultures here. So we can just have ourselves moving forward with an immediate effect the way we need it. So I was talking about the impact, the 5 positive impacts of using the cow dung onto the fish pond. Like yesterday, I've started to make sure that I'm throwing much of the cow dung to the fish pond, which is the bigger one here. So they're going to be accommodating like 300 tilapia fish that are going to be red, which is the bright red tilapias that are going to be placing here, but monosex only. Which is, I mean that whenever I talk about it's monosex, I mean that these are the only male fish that will be reared here, no female here. Because much of the people talk about, oh, Gintu, how do you select the male fish only to be stocked here? I talk about whenever the hatching of the tilapia fish is occurring into how can we call it, where the hatching of the tilapia fish is, the hatcheries there. We can talk about the hatcheries there. So we are having the egg. Now the egg can just facilitate to have something called a fry. From a fry it goes to a fingerling. From a fingerling it will go to a post fingerling, then it will go to a bigger fish. So when they are talk about the fries, most of no one can just select that these are female, these are male. Nobody can just know such kind of a thing. So they use something called the hormone, which is a hormone, which is testosterone hormone, which converts the female genome gender and to the male genome gender that we are talking about. Talk about the genotypic and the phenotypic ratio of them for us to have this kind of the male phenotypicism that is always being achieved at the hatcheries there. So that is how we are just getting this kind of the fish that's going to be rearing as the tilapia. So I don't want manipulation of the fish, because when we have manipulation of the fish and to that small fish pond there, we're going to have much of the competition. The competition whereby we mean that we're going to be having how can you feed that such kind of the fish? We have small fries, we have eggs, we have fries, we have fingerlings, we have post fingerlings, we have big fish. For you to feed such kind of the fish, it will have a problem whereby how can you gauge that kind of the flour? Talk about the feeds that we'll be giving them. So it will just confuse you that how are you going to feed them? Because you have from children to the adults. Because you can talk about you want to cook rice. Maybe adults don't eat rice, and you're talking about, oh, maybe children like rice, but adults don't like rice. That is it. So how can you gauge it? Because here we go with the crude proteins of the feeds that we are talking about here. So that's why I always talk about I'm going to be feeding or throwing much of the cow dung onto the fish pond, so as it has 5 important impacts. This is the impacts that I want to talk about. Is the first impact is it's going to be turning water into green. That green terminology is what is called the green bloom or the green turbidity, or much of the people can call it the algae concentration in the water level. And that algae, it's always a balanced diet to the fish, because it has essential nutrients relevant for the growth of the fish, but not of a high capacity of the crude protein. Because this kind of the fish, they like crude protein, is what is gauging this kind of the feeds that you can give to the fish. And that's why whenever the algae concentration is there, you can rear much of the fish using the algae only, but they will have a low growth rate, but they will grow. That is the impact of having the algae, and you can just produce it normally. Because here I don't want to use much of the commercial feeds, because this kind of the fish here are not just there for the competition that, oh, I want to have this kind of the fish ready for the market in this kind of the time zone. No, it's just there to make sure that any kind of the moment that we talk about, okay, we have food there, we have fish there, or we can just learn, because I want to be having much of a good sector here, whereby even people just come to learn about a small scaled fish farmer who wants to introduce himself into fish farming, and you can do it from your comfort zone. That's what I want to bring much on to our village here, because much of the fish ponds that I have, they're called earthen fish ponds, and I could have started from that kind of the point. Much of the people to understand what I really mean about a fish pond here. What is a fish pond here? Much of the people talk about, oh, Gintu, you have started about, oh, the fish pond, rearing of the fish. You have not started from talk about the grassroots of it. And how many fish ponds do you have, and how can you categorize a fish pond, and why do you build a fish pond in a rectangular manner, not an oval? But I have a circular one there. But I'm going to be talking about how are we preferring. Why didn't I add talk about a circle one, but I added talk about a rectangle one and as a fish pond there. What do I mean is we have different types of fish ponds here. We have earthen fish ponds, which are naturally dug from the ground, excavated from the ground, and having its own natural water with its own talk about whenever we talk about its own water, I by mean that this kind of the water, it's going to be coming either with an inlet, but it doesn't have a high drainage of water. It has a capillarity of water. That is the good gauge of talking about this kind of the fish ponds I'm talking about. And we have something called liner ponds. Liner ponds are the ones that you can just use polythene sheets. Talk about HDPE, which is a high density polythene cover that you can just use in terms of a fish pond. So as you can just put the water, it's only evaporation, but low drainage of water to the ground. And we have pond water, which is talk about how can you call it, a dam. We have a dam also. A dam can just act as one of storing. There's something called hoppers and something called cages. So you can just have a very big dam, but you can use other strategies of using hoppers. Hoppers are the small nets that are provided like mosquito nets that cannot let eggs out or the fries out. So that kind of the hoppers are used in terms of rearing the talk about the fries. Whenever they are being hatched from a hatchery, they are placed in hoppers so as they can adapt the environment. Talk about climatization of that kind of the water wherever they are, and that is the fact about the hoppers. And the cages are probably I talk about they're small in size, like this kind of a dam here. Talk about this kind of a small pond here, and it's just gauged in small lengths and width there, and it's just having floaters and sinkers, and it's a net provided that it's very sealed in a way that it cannot let eggs out, or it can just make sure that it's only for rearing much of the fish that you are intending to do. If you have like the brood stock, you can just decide that this is the brood stock. I want to make sure that I'm rearing in this kind of the cage, so as whenever they attain the talk about the harvesting pot, or they're attaining the motherhood, talk about the maturity, they're going to be taken to the laboratory so as they can just have some experience, 2-3 experience and laboratory checkups, so they can just take and hatch much of the eggs from there. And also we have talk about one of the uniquest fish pond that I've ever built, that it's going to be coming to the system of the agriculture. It's called a flying beam fish pond. It's one of a flying fish pond is like a constructed fish pond with talk about it's just like an earthen pond with a constructed pond also. So it's a gauge of 2.5. It's one of the fish pond that I only created and constructed at Ayamaro Villa, whereby it's one of its own uniquest. But much of the people don't have it because it's used in 2 times, whereby it's just constructed, but it uses natural water from the ground to sustain its own natural oxygen concentration, and also its own naturality of rearing much of the fish. That is the best moment about using or having such kind of a pond called flying beam fish pond. Also, we have another fish pond called a constructed pond. Like the one I'm having here, it's called a constructed pond. That it doesn't have its own natural water, but you can lure water to engage, or you can accommodate water, or you can make sure that you are directing much of water to in. So it should have inlet and an outlet. That is why you see we have at this kind of the pot, we have an inlet there, and we have an outlet that that's getting to the constructed pond here. So that is the best moment that I was ever talking and speaking about. So those are the types of the ponds that we are having, and you can just engage on which one do you need and how can you just imply to have such kind of a pond and to your comfort zone. And also when I get into why are they oval, why are they rectangular, why are they circular, why are they trapezium, so it's regarding to the way you need. But in talk about agricultural way, talk about whenever you want to do in agricultural practices, which one is the best? Is circular, wherever you are, you can just guess between the circular, talk about triangle, talk about rectangle, talk about oval. Which one is the best from wherever you are? I'm giving you a second so you can just think about which is the best whenever you want to rear much of the fish. And as you are thinking about it, and why do people consider constructing much of the ponds and getting them to the way you know? And this is the main point here. Much of the fish pond are constructed rectangle. Why are they constructed rectangle but not circular like the one that is there? In agricultural way, because much of the things that you always do in terms of agriculture, in terms of fish farming, it's promptly that you are doing business. Not that it's just for home consumption. But what we need is you have a cash flow. How can you get a cash flow of this kind of the fish? How can you get a little bit of money for you to buy some soap for you? It's not a matter that you have to wait for a salary to come so as you can just talk about, oh, I have to buy a soap, I have to buy this one, I have to go and borrow. No, it's just a cash flow. What cash flow do you have? If you have a fish pond that is maintained, that you want to make sure that you're going to be getting a little bit of a thing from there, how do you do it? You can construct a circular, which means that it's for the home consumption. It doesn't have much of the calculation. But if it's just made for the commercial purposes, what do I mean about the commercial purposes? This kind of the fish pond, it's just prepared in a manner that you want to rear much of the fish and sell them for the market demand. And for you to sustain the market demand, you should have a good size. I'm going to be coming to that kind of the way. So if you have that kind of a pond and you want to calculate how amount of the feeds you will be using, how talk about the number of fish you will stock there, you should calculate. You should have the calculation into your head. Why am I doing this kind of the calculation I'm talking about here? The calculation in a different way that I can calculate that this kind of a fish pond I'm having here, we have to find the volume ratio, because I never talked about this kind of the cages. I talked about the cages, you can just use the cage, but inside a very big dam for you to make sure that everything's coming out. A cage is calculated with the volume ratio. So when you have a small pond, like the one I'm having here, so that's why you saw it has a deeper, it has a deeper trenches here and deeper waters. Why do I have deeper waters here? It means that I want to rear fish according to the volume ratio of water, not according to the size of the pond. That is the difference between the water level of the pond. It's very, very unique in terms of rearing much of the fish. Why do I mean about the volume ratio? If you have a water which is exceeding 2 meters of height, it means that that kind of water has a very large volume ratio of water. So you can just calculate that you could have very many fish because of the oxygen concentration that's going to be into that kind of the pond. And also, I'm going to be coming to that kind of the part of the oxygen concentration. That's the rearing of much of the fish there. So this kind of the pond is calculated, that you can calculate the length times width times height. So as you can know, the volume ratio of that water, or the volume of that capacity water, or that kind of a pond. And when I talk about that one, you can rear fish according to the volume ratio, but not the size of the pond. Where it comes, where Kimberly? Nini? Benti acha kuchokoza watu. Mwachie. Mwachie. So when I come back to this kind of the way I'm talking about the talk about the surface area, the surface area exposed. Agintora okay answer. Yule alikuwa plaster hapo. Leo anachapa maplasta makobra uwezi ka. Alikuwa huko. So guys, when we go back to the same region I'm talking about, much of the people will be talking about whenever you have a pond, how to calculate much of the fish that you want to install in terms of the pond. That one now depends with the length times. You know, we can calculate the perimeter of an area of a pond, and we can calculate the volume ratio of the pond, and we can calculate the perimeter of a pond. You understand it? The perimeter is going round. But talking about the area, is the area exposed in terms of that pond, the area coverage of that pond. And when we talk about the volume ratio, it's whatever can go in, how bigger it is, how low it will be in terms of the volume ratio. So when you want to rear much of the fish, if it's a small pond, you talk about the volume ratio of that fish pond. If it's a larger, it's an area of that pond. So it depends on how do you want to calculate it. So when you have a bigger area exposed to the pond, or an area of a pond, determines even it depends with the volume of water that's in. Talk about a good gauge of you to rear much of the fish in a pond. It should be 0.9 centimeters or 1.20 centimeters, so as you can just get, which is approximately 0.9 meters, and talk about it's 90 centimeters, which is 0.9, and 1.20 meters of the water height, so as you can just rear much of the fish there, because the air concentration, talk about the oxygen concentration in that water will be high. And even whenever we have some of the tides, whenever they're going to be appearing into the water, talk about the water effect. So it's going to be accommodating much of the air whenever we have much of the bubbling. And also you can talk about you're going to be having your own oxygen concentration pump, so as you can just have much of the rearing of the fish. Even oxygen concentration is a unique character in terms of rearing much of the fish. And also when you are talking about why are we constructing the talk about the rectangle one, it's an easy calculation of determining which kind of the amount of fish will you use, how amount of feeds will you use. It's easy for you to calculate. So when a person talks about you have a circular pond, how are you going to calculate the area? Talk about maybe it's an aged person in an area, or talk about an aged person is talking about constructing a pond, and he should calculate how amount of the fish will use, amount of feeds he will use. So you have a circular pond like that one here. So will you start telling the aged person that start using pi r squared? So it will be becoming so hectic, and for you to calculate that, it's a pi r square, pi d squared, or use pi, what is pi? So it will become so difficult for this kind of the aged people. Maybe not everybody is a learned person, and not everybody who is learned can do the fish farming, and not everybody who is a learned person can have a fish pond, or can give a work to another person who can just determine to have a fish pond. So as for you to have this kind of a good moment for you to calculate. So for an easy way of agriculture, make sure that you are constructing a rectangular, talk about a rectangular fish pond, so as it can give you an easy time for the calculation. It's just talking about it's 30 times 20, and you have find the area. So what about now we are told that it's an area exposed is the pi d squared, pi r. What is r? So you have to measure much of the thing. So it will give you a very complicated statement for you to start luring this kind of a person and calculating how amount and how the feed will be used. And when we have the fish installed in the fish pond, we have also to calculate, determine the ratio, determine the size, and calculate the pond, and make sure that how are you going to feed them. That is another scenario that will bring much of the complications whenever you want to lure much of the people to rear much of the fish onto your fish pond. When I go back to talking about you have calculated everything, now you want to install much of the fish. Do you have water quantity? Talk about the water quantity, not talking about the ratio again. Talk about the water quantity and the oxygen concentration, and where are you going to site this kind of the pond. The pond should not be under the shades. That is the fact. The fish pond should be in an open airspace. So as this kind of an airspace, talk about an open airspace, this kind of the fish, they rely on direct sunlight. What do I mean about direct sunlight? The water has to gain chlorophyll, photosynthesis. So as the growing phytoplanktons, the growing zooplanktons in that kind of the pond, they can get sufficient lighting for them to chlorophyllize or photosynthesize this kind of the food on themselves, and make sure that they're going to be sustaining their sustainability of growing onto the pond, and make sure that those kind of phytoplanktons and zooplanktons are becoming the food of the fish. Much of the people will be asking about what is phytoplanktons, what is zooplanktons. Phytoplanktons are some of the plants that are always growing underground water, and the fish can feed on it. 1, algae. 2, we have much of the fish like water lily. We have other things that will just come out that fish can consume. And when we talk about zooplanktons, we mean about some animals that will just evacuate from the ground, like the earthworms. We can just know about those ones. And much of the animals that fish can just feed on. Talk about, we have the oxygen concentration that will just lead unto it. So when I've just introduced you, where can you construct a pond? It means that a pond should be constructed where there is security. Because insecurity is one of the objectives that are making people to not invest in fish farming, because of a high demand of intolerance of stealing. When we want to evacuate from this kind of the scenario, it's one of the best moments for a person to understand that is a security offered at that kind of a particular point. And how are you going to deal with this kind of the security or insecurity pattern? Much of the people install solars there and have CCTVs there. They have lightings there. They have security like dogs there. They have a perimeter walls here. But me, I have not yet I have only dogs here. You can just understand it. So when we come to the real conscience of the time, and now you're talking about, now you have selected a very better place for you to rear this kind of the fish. And are you going to have a lab? Talk about the, it's called the knowledge and skills. Are you having the knowledge and the skills of rearing some of the fish? Much of the people can venture into only growing much of the fish, but they don't have any kind of talk about any kind of making sure that they have knowledge and skills for them to rear this kind of the fish. So it will become so hectic for them to have that kind of the thing called it's called what? A know-how. How can you do it? Technical know-how. How can you do it in terms of knowing that this kind of the fish pond gonna be reared this way, or this kind of the fish pond gonna be treated this way? And how are you going to maintain a fish pond? Which kind of the tools are being used in the terms of fish rearing, and such kind of an extra, which is extra things that are gonna be coming in. So that is the best impact of you whenever you're gonna be engaging in fish farming. You should consider and making sure that everyone who is there knows and has the knowledge, skills for you to make. That's why sometimes much of the people depend on the circular fish pond there, like the one that's there, to make sure that they can deal with it for the home consumption. There's no much of intention talking about, oh, I have to go for the concentrate, talk about fertilization of the pond, how are you going to do this one? And so it's just throwing there some fish and you leave them there. So we have such kind of a way of rearing much of the fish. I will be coming to that kind of the mode of rearing fish. We have different modes of rearing much of the fish here, because we can just decide to have talk about a concentrate pond, talk about a commercial pond. How are you going to rear much of the fish? Which kind of the characters do we have in terms of rearing this kind of the fish that are in a commercial pond and a home pond? How are you going to maintain this kind of the fish production in a home pond? Are you going to use the commercial feeds? Are you going to use the human feeds? Talk about the local feeds. And we have such kind of the feeds, the methods of making feeds. So you can use the commercial feeds and you can use homemade feeds. And which kind of the plants, talk about the cereals, the legumes, are you going to be used? Talk about the substrates that you're going to use in terms of the ingredients, in terms of formulating this kind of the fish for the fish. I'm going to be coming to those kind of the topics whenever it comes to that direct point, whenever we're going to be making sure that we're going to be learning much of the fish farming from wherever you are, and you can make it an easy thing for you to make, and you just get much of the accommodation from Gintu one-on-one from the G Castle here, and much of the people will be ever learning from the real G. So as you can learn and know, understand and gauge, act and judge, and make sure that you are understanding A to Z the rearing of the fish from an fish pond, which is humanly protected and humanly constructed for you to make sure that you can just make it happening here. So it's one of the uniquest point. Support Gintu and make it happen. We're going to be teaching here some of the students. We're going to be coming for the lecture, and I want to be making sure that I'm going for this kind of the fish farming. And also, I never gone to school for the fish farming, you can understand. So you can just get from me because I've seen it, I've acted on it, I've judged upon it. So going back to the G Castle. The G Castle is now getting a shape here. So we have finished about the G Castle here, and the talk about we have finished in terms of the tiling, and now it's looking so fantastic as I'm just walking to this kind of a small pavement here, so I can just make sure that we are getting much of the pointer and gauging them very fantastic at this kind of the moment, and getting to the real brim of the section here as we go on with the G Castle here. Much of the people have been supporting and talking about Ogintu. We're going to be making it happen. We're going to be throwing people to an imbroglio, which is the best moment for the other people to understand that we are having the point right now. It's us to make it, not them to understand on how we're going to be making it. That is the fantastic moment. And right now, it's in the evening point, and the sun is setting. That's why I'm coming every evening here to make sure that we're going to be getting much of the points and pinpointing what is really has to come out at which kind of the immersement of the moment. Because right now, tomorrow, we're going to be embracing and coming back to the G Castle in terms of fixing much of the nails that are no longer available. Much of the people are talking about Ogintu, we don't have rubbers. We have rubbers, guys. We have rubbers. We have rubbers here. We have rubbers. Rubbers are available. Rubbers are available. And the real fact is we are getting to get forward. And that is the main point that we are looking for, and support Gintu and make it happen. I'm going to be giving you much of the classes, much of the lectures. So as whoever wants to learn from Gintu can learn from Gintu and can do something so fantastic from Gintu. And I think much of the people talk about, oh, Gintu, I want you to get me to this kind of the point. I'm going to be coming to fish rearing. I have so many subsections in terms of fish running, and you can just get and know what are we doing. And it's only just Gintu for the security purposes and be protected, so I can just give you much of the lecture for you to do it. And somebody can talk about Gintu going to be coming to the USA, and they're going to be coming to make sure that I'm teaching fish farming, and people just understand, because I'll have to speak, because right now if a person can understand my language, it means that we can just understand each other. It's just practice makes perfect, and you can just make it perfect as the way you are just getting forward. So as we just go forward to this kind of the brim, we are now getting out of the tiling. Now we're going to be getting down to the windows here. And whenever we talk about the windows, I always mean that the windows are going to be so fantastic, but we are lacking much of the material. Wherever you have just reached this kind of the brim, guys, you can support Gintu, so I can just buy much of the materials, because we are now lacking much of the material. Even the guy who was making sure that he's a welder, he even went home very early because of the lack of the material that are now finished and to the site. You can support Gintu and make it happen, because we always gather here, and this is Team G, and making G look very fantastic and very califragistically good. Support, so we can just make it happen, because it's us to happen and make it happen. Because if it's not us as a team, we're going to be talking about, we're going to be laughing, but we are from far. Where we are heading is in a small section that is still remaining in terms of plumbing. Right now I've spoken with Strongman 254. He's talking about you're going to be having some of the works, but from 20s and above, you're going to be having much of the time, and you're going to be coming for the quotation, and we can just decide. Strongman, and you can just talk about, oh, Gintu going to not come or come. Things are going to be happening, because he cannot have a job in Mombasa that is going to be direct as mine here. He come to me and transport from Mombasa to here, it's 3,000. Going back is 3,000. So you're going to be having a quotation which is so long for me to accommodate. Sometimes if you're going to not have some much of the job, you're going to be lowering or offering him a job here to make sure that the plumbing is done. But we have also the local people here. We can just use them. But I always wanted to know much of this kind of the people who I have ever seen, I've worked with. They have that kind of a heart of they can help. Because I propose that you're going to be teaching much of only Mayani to be introduced in this kind of the plumbing, and also to get to Mombasa and learn, because this kind of the things here outside here, they're going to be shenanigans. You have to work hard and make sure that he's improving in terms of making sure that he is learning to get another skill apart from talking about going to be depending on YouTube, because sometimes we can be threatened like the way I'm being threatened here, running helter-skelter, keep Babylon kills last year, confront us and this kind of the postcoms of the day. But it's going to be so unique whenever you can just have this kind of the gentleman who can just introduce him into life and know how to hustle and get much of the money according to having a course, which is fantastic. Even him, whenever things get bad into YouTube, he can just talk about, oh, I have another job to do, and support my YouTube in terms of uploading and do other things like the way I always do. That is the best moment. And also, we have the in concept that talks about you're gonna be you need my only call, so as you can just come for the quotation of the blundering of the G Castle here. And from there, you're gonna be going back to making sure that after the blundering, we're going to be going back to the plaster. After the plaster, guys, imagine we are remaining with a very small section, so as you can just get out. Somebody can talk about again to get this kind of the 500 USA. You could have moved me so far. 500 USA. Yeah. You can just move me very far. And I can just talk about you're going to be moving and making things to have a change here. And that is the best moment here. So after talking about we have finished with tilings here, we are now getting to make sure that we're fixing much of the nails here and fixing much of the windows that are already produced there, but we are lacking much of the other material like locks, and also we're talking about much of the steel tubes here, so as you can just maintain the value of the gauge of the windows that are going to be produced as grills. And already we are just having also the material for this kind of the deck here, so they can just come out of the deck very fantastic and so elaboratively a constant of making sure that everything is possible under the sun of the Lord. This kind of the materials that are needed at the deck here, they are 33 materials. Talk about 24 1 squared by 1.5 mm square tubes, which are 24 of them, and also we have 9 which are 1.5 by 1 by 1.5 mm in terms of making sure that 9 of them for us to demobilize here. So all of them can just cost about all of them until the 6th one that we need for the window fixation, they are costing about 450 US dollars for me to complete this kind of the work. But the other money in terms of paying them small in terms of their wages and their labor, are going to be making sure that I'm demobilizing as Gintu and making it happen. I really respect your time. You have just taken and watched much of the video, and you're going to be making sure some of the people proposed that Gintu make a master class of the fish farm. I'm going to be formulating that kind of a master class so people can just learn and get to know more. Fantastic. Na hii 100 inamaanisha nini? Iko full. Hii 100 inamaanisha nini?
100. Inamaanisha ile current yenye na nini inatumia kuchoma. 100 ni huwa ni 250.
Unaweza increase.
Hiyo full ni 250.
You can increase it to 250.
So hii nikichoma nayo inatoboa. Moto ni mwingi, nataka ile chuma yenye thickness yake ni kubwa.
Fantastic. Kama chassis. Okay. 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 Okay.
Sawa. Sasa tu anze kazi.